everybody, this is John Rigby with Rigby's Pool Services. Today's topic is cyanuric acid, also known as CYA. It's a topic that is so widely misunderstood, or simply people just don't know anything about it, and therefore they don't factor it in when they're talking about balancing their pools. This is something that makes all the difference in the world when you're talking about your chlorine and its effectiveness. And if you do not understand how to balance and maintain your cyanuric acid level, you're going to run into major problems down the road, and you're not going to be able to effectively keep your pool clear. So when we talk about cyanuric acid, we can also refer to it as CYA or stabilizer, or some people even call it water conditioner. Now, when you call it conditioner, that's a little bit confusing to some people, because in some areas conditioner means to soften the water, and some people consider water conditioner to be a product like Indoor, which is like a borax based product. So for this reason, for this video, we'll refer to it as stabilizer or CYA or cyanuric acid. And basically, when you're talking about cyanuric acid, you're simply talking about a molecule. It's a combination of nitrogen and carbon. It's an ion, and basically its only job is to protect your chlorine from the sun. As we all know, the UV rays of the sun are very harmful to chlorine, and on a very sunny day, the sun can break down and eliminate your chlorine at a very quick pace. Because of this, we need to add cyanuric acid to the pool. It goes in there with its nitrogen atoms, and it allows for 3 chlorines to attach to it. Okay, and when these chlorines attach to the nitrogen atom, they form a really weak bond, and because of this weak bond, it allows the chlorine to pop off and go attack the contaminants when it needs to sanitize the water. If the bond was stronger, and thank goodness it isn't, if it was stronger, the chlorine would be ineffective and not able to unattach and go attack the contaminant. So because of this, it's a weak bond, it breaks off, and it goes and does its job. Now, Dichlor, which is a different form of CYA, is di, meaning 2, so it allows for only 2 chlorine molecules to attach, whereas trichlor, meaning 3, allows for the 3 chlorine molecules, atoms to attach. Okay, it extends it by 8 times, allows it to last longer in your water, but there are some problems that we need to be mindful of. Okay, as we all know, when chlorine is added to the water, it produces, there's 2 different chemicals that the chlorine turns into. There's hypochlorous acid and hypochlorite. Okay, those are the 2 different types, and I'll show you a picture of these. And as you can see on the graph, these 2 chemicals in the water work in equilibrium with one another. Okay, as we know, chlorine acts as both an oxidizer and a sanitizer. Okay, and we have to hit the oxidation point before sanitation can begin, which is why adding ozone and UV and mineral systems aid your chlorine, because they help with that oxidation, all right, making your chlorine more of a sanitizer. So the problem with this is, and pH, again, as you can see, pH plays a huge role in this as well. As your levels of your pH begin to go down or up, the equilibrium of the 2 chemicals begin to fluctuate. Okay, CYA also does the same thing. Just like pH affects the effectiveness of your chlorine, cyanuric acid does the same thing, and we really have to be mindful of that. So a higher level of cyanuric acid basically means your chlorine is less and less and less effective. All right, so it's kind of like a seesaw. As your cyanuric acid level goes up, the effectiveness of your chlorine goes down. And while some professionals suggest running a CYA of 60 to 80, in my opinion, you need to be closer to that 30 mark. And I'll show you why. When you look at the graphics, you'll understand why. As you increase your cyanuric acid by 10, your effectiveness of your chlorine begins to drop drop, drop, to the point where when we get to a CYA level of 100, we need at least 8 parts per million of chlorine to kill off algae. Okay, so if you have no stabilizer in your pool, no cyanuric acid in your pool, you can run 1 part per million of chlorine and effectively kill off algae, right? You just need 1 part per million. All of a sudden, you introduce cyanuric acid, which you're helping to protect this one from the sun, but it also weakens it to the point that now you need to make it 8 parts per million to have the same effectiveness as the 1 without any. Okay, and I'll show you the graphics. You can take a look at this and understand for yourself. So we kind of use the rule of like 7 parts per million, 7.5 parts per million per 100 gives you the 1. I like to say, just say 8. So at a level of 100 cyanuric acid, you need at least 8 parts per million to rid your pool of algae. That just goes to show you how much, as you're increasing, how much it really diminishes the effectiveness of that chlorine. And as your cyanuric acid keeps getting higher and higher, your water is getting more and more aggressive. Okay, also, so that's another thing we're factoring in is your LSI, your saturation index. Okay, and higher levels of cyanuric acid create a really aggressive environment, and it's really bad for your pool surfaces and your pool equipment and such. So when we're talking about adding cyanuric acid to your pool, and we talk about how you need at least 8 parts per million when your level is at 100, okay, we can do simple math to understand that if it's at a level 8 parts per million at 100, we can cut that in half, and so at a level of 50 parts per million, you need at least 4 parts per million chlorine. So when you're at 50 CYA, you need at least 4 parts per million chlorine to kill off algae. Okay, so you can understand how keeping it lower is actually more beneficial to your pool. And we're starting, new science is actually suggesting that simply having a level of 10 CYA in your pool is actually pretty effective at blocking the sun's effects. So in my mind, keep it lower. If you can keep it at 30 or below, even better. So here's the major reason why having high levels of cyanuric acid in your pool are bad. Not just because they weaken your chlorine's effectiveness, and not just because it makes your chlorine so lethargic and lackadaisical, but when it gets really high, there's only one way to remove it, and that's by draining your pool water. And the problem with that is even if you drain your pool water, you're not guaranteed to get all of it out. For instance, if you let your CYA get out of control and it gets above 100, the only thing you can do is drain at least half your pool, add fresh unstabilized water to it. Now, cyanuric acid will get in the plaster of your pool walls, and as you add that new fresh water, there's still presence of cyanuric acid in it. There have been cases where people have drained their pools completely, put in completely fresh water, and have still found levels around 30 in their pool. I'm telling you, it's so much easier to keep it low and in check than it is to let it get high and deal with it. They do make a product, natural chemistry does make a product, but it's really difficult to use. You have to really, really pay attention and follow the directions to a T. And even then, it's only kind of 50-50 chance that it might work. My suggestion is just don't let it get out of control. Keep it low and don't let it get out of control. Now, the products that are going to have the cyanuric acid in them, again, are your trichlor and your dichlor. This is why we don't suggest shocking with trichlor or dichlor. So if they're in the pucks and it says trichlor on them, you don't want to use a trichlor or dichlor to shock as well. Your pucks will contain a little bit of cyanuric acid, and when you shock, I recommend shocking with liquid, or if you don't have a calcium problem, then calcium hypochlorite is fine. What I do to start my pools up in the spring, I add just a little bit of CYA, get it to, maybe a 10, and then if they're using the pucks, the CYA will kind of creep up throughout the season, and then splash out and refill that kind of stuff kind of keeps it in check. But again, only dichlor and trichlor have the stabilizer in them, and they're adding a little bit to your overall level every time you put a puck in the pool. So be mindful of this and do not go overkill. In fact, you may not even need to put any stabilizer in your pool if you're a year-round user. Your pucks are probably driving your levels up constantly, so you should be mindful and you should be draining a little bit and adding water. Okay. Now, to the point of having 8 parts per million chlorine when you're at a level of 100 cyanuric acid, that doesn't sound that bad. However, when it's time to shock, we recommend shocking your pool 5 to 10 times your current parts per million of chlorine. So if you're sitting at 8, now all of a sudden you've got a shock, and think about that. You're talking about having to raise it 40 to 80 parts per million. Well, that is just insane. That's insane. And that's just to shock. All right, try bringing your chlorine level back down when you've got it up to 80 parts per million. I mean, that is dangerous. So again, keep it low. Do not let it get out of control. And really be mindful of this. When it starts getting high, that chlorine starts becoming so ineffective that now all of a sudden it can't get over the oxidation point to become a sanitizer. And it's not going to keep your pool clean. So, you know, I would say at least 75% of the time when somebody's got a really nasty pool and they can't figure out why, it was clear, and all of a sudden it's nasty. Usually, either 1, the pool's unbalanced, or 2, your cyanuric acid is off the charts. And at that point, there's nothing we can do except drain your pool and refill it. And even then, you're still going to have about a level of 30. So really, really important topic, and it's something that people really don't understand. But I hope I was able to clear it up for you and sum it up. That, again, just to recap, your cyanuric acid simply protects your chlorine from the sun. But are those benefits better than all the other downsides to it? All right, so if you don't use any cyanuric acid, you're just losing chlorine from the sun. You just have to keep putting more and more in. To some people, that's okay. They'd rather not deal with the side effects of CYA, and they'd rather use liquid chlorine or calcium hypochlorite. You know, so that's up to you. Something to think about. I hope you learned something. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out. Let me know. Shoot me a message or look me up on Facebook. Again, John Rigby of Rigby's Pool Services, covering cyanuric acid. Thank you.